Hi students, welcome to our first official screencast in ninth grade biology. Today we're starting our new unit on cells, and as we start the new unit, we're also just trying a new approach with our screencast. So instead of our regular warm-up on Socrative today, we'll still go to Socrative, but instead we're going to do a pretest. So I know we've all learned about cells in middle school. So if you look at our agenda for today, it's introduction to cells, and we'll also start talking about specialized cells. But I said, what do you remember about cells from 8th grade? Because this is a chance for you to reflect and see what it is that you learned and remember, but also it's information for me so I know what we need to spend more time on. So for your warm-up, go ahead and go to Socrative.com as we always do, and you'll go to student login. And our room name, remember, you don't need an account. You just are joining our classroom. And our classroom, since we're in room 112, we are Science Rocks 112. Okay. So click join, and then it'll ask you for your name. Okay, so I have my name, last name first, enter with your own name, and then it has 20 questions for you. So for these 20 questions, put your best guess. You might remember, it might be a hypothesis. It might be an educated guess of some kind. So this one, I'll tell you, we'll go over the first one together. It says, this organelle is the powerhouse for the cell. It converts glucose into usable energy. Okay, so if I were to look for mitochondria, that's it. I'm going to click submit answer and see how it'll show me if I'm right or wrong. And it will also tell me what the right answer is right here. So I want you to take your time actually looking through and getting the feedback to see if something rings a bell. And also this video is meant not just to sit and watch. It's something I'd like for you to pause and do the activities, and then you can restart the video and continue on with the day's lesson. So go ahead and pause the video here and do our pretest for the day. Okay, so welcome back now that you did your pretest. Briefly today, we're going to, if you look at the rest of our agenda, I'd like to go over the top 6 organelles. I know you just looked at a lot more than that in your pretest, but we're going to go over the 6 most important ones. You'll have a chance to kind of experience a simulation of building a cell, and then we're going to sign up for this research project that we're going to start today. It's really exciting, actually. So for these top 6 organelles, here we go. So the first one is a cell wall. And in middle school, I know that you learned a lot from pictures that look like this one on the right, that look like a cartoon version, a very simplified version. We are still going to look at those sometimes, but I want to start looking at what cells look like in real life, because there's such a huge variety. It's really amazing, all the types of cells found in different organisms. Okay, so if you look at this real image of, this is a leaf under a microscope, the cells look very straight. The edges are very rectangular. So that's not what animal cells look like. That's caused by a cell wall. And it says they're found in plant cells only, but not animal cells. So that's because they are very rigid. They do provide structure and support for the plant cell. Okay, so that's cool to see under a microscope. Next one is the nucleus. And so this is extremely important. It contains all of the DNA, which, remember, has the instructions for building proteins that do many jobs in our body, including help us express our traits. So if you look at these real images over here, you see a lot of dark dots. Now this one on the top actually looks kind of messy. This one is ciliated, pseudostratified epithelial tissue. Basically, it's made up of a lot of cells because it's a tissue, and it would be found in the lining of air passageways, like inside your nose or inside the lining of your trachea leading to your lungs. And so it has a cilia on top that helps keep out particles like dust and pollen. So when we breathe air in, those particles don't get to our lungs. But why we're talking about it on the nucleus page is look at all these dots in here. Those dark purple dots, those are the nuclei. So in lab, when we use the microscopes next week, when we look under a microscope, a lot of times we don't get to see a lot of the organelles, except we can see the nuclei. So all of these dots are nuclei, a nucleus for each cell. So that tells me there's a lot of cells here. You'll also get to look at a cell from your own cheek. which is exciting. Under a microscope, that's what these are, they're cheek cells. And I can't really see any of the other organelles, even though there are organelles there. But the one that stands out under the microscope is the nucleus. So that's what that dark dot is. Okay. Next one, cell membrane. So this is found in both plant cells and animal cells. This over here is a little portion of an animal cell. You can tell the outside of it is more kind of like a blob and less straight edged. Where a plant cell has the straight edge from the cell wall, but then inside that it also has the cell membrane. So plant cells have both. And the cell membrane is really important. We'll talk a lot about it because it allows some things to pass through, like water, for example, while blocking other things. So we call it selectively permeable. Okay, this next part is really something you might not have heard of before. They're called microvilli. So on the cell membrane, if you look at this picture on the bottom right, actually grows upwards. And so it has these little like finger-like projections. The cell membrane actually comes up. So it's creating more surface area to touch things like food that we're digesting. So if you look at this picture over here, it's kind of purplish. That is an image of the lining on the inside of someone's intestines. So all of these little like hairy looking things, it's not actually hair, that's microvilli. And so they're increasing the surface area of the cell, and that's allowing it to touch that food that's digesting. So those cells are even better at absorbing all of those nutrients and absorbing all of that water that we need from our food. Okay. Next one would be ribosome. This one, we talked last chapter about how important proteins are, how we have enzymes or proteins like melanin that give us our skin color and our hair color. What makes proteins are ribosomes. And if you look at this textbook image over here, those little dots, those are teeny tiny organelles, the ribosomes. So even though proteins are so important, we rely on the tiniest organelle to make them. And so this picture makes it look bigger than it is because we're really zoomed in. But this big blob, the kind of greenish blob, is the ribosome. And then all of these little circles, those are amino acids. So it's like a little factory building together piece by piece to make the proteins. Okay, we have two more. We have the mitochondria, which is a common one for people to remember from middle school. I know we all learned it as the mighty mitochondria. It's very mighty because it helps the cell get energy. So it converts large energy molecules like glucose. It breaks them down into smaller energy molecules called ATP that are small enough that our cells can actually use them. So it's really important because without this mitochondria, our cells wouldn't be able to use the energy from our food. Okay, last one is the chloroplast. And so the chloroplast is found only in plants or producers, meaning they can make their own food. And it means they don't have to eat. They have this organelle, we do not as humans. And so all they need is sunlight, carbon dioxide from the air, and water. And they're able to make sugar from that. And what does that for them is the chloroplast. So if you look at this cell, you can see the like straight edge on the outside of the cell. So I know it's a plant because that's a cell wall making it look that way. And then the other hint that it's a plant is that it's very green with all of these green chloroplasts in there. Plant cells have them, animal cells don't. Okay, so before we move on to other things, I want to give you a chance to do a quick review. So you have the paper that you got in on your way into class today, which is this simulation worksheet. Right? I have it posted here, but you have the paper version. So you're going to go to this simulation, I'll show you in a second, and use it to explore and review the organelles. It should take about 15 minutes. And this second page especially is important because we're not just memorizing the organelles, we're trying to think about how does that organelle help the cell do its job. So if I look over here, I'm like, well, cells are going to need to store things like water. How do they do that? What organelle helps them do that? Or they might need to carry things around and transport materials. How can they do that? Okay, and then you're also going to do a Venn diagram here and compare plant and animal cells. So that's our big idea, is what's the difference between plant and animal cells, and what do these organelles do to actually help them? Okay, so where you're gonna go to find this information is this simulation. If you click on this link, it'll take you here. What do cells do? Okay, so I'll click start, and then if you look, it says you will begin with the animal cell. It says roll your mouse over each organelle. If I do that, see how this pops up. So I have like little information boxes that pop up so I can learn about each organelle. Okay. And you can see I'm also going to make both an animal cell and a plant cell. It won't let me make the plant cell until my animal cell is complete. Okay, so I need to build my cell. So if I try to do something that's not correct, like put a cell wall over here, it's going to say, nope, this doesn't belong here. You can't do that. So it's going to help you and guide you through. So I'm going to do like cell membrane. I know an animal cell has that. And I can keep going through and building my actual cell. Okay, so you're going to go through and do that. Once it says your animal cell is complete, you can go to plant cell. But as you go, make sure you're reading about these organelles, the ones especially that you don't know about. Okay, so go ahead and pause here, fill out your chart, build your simulation. This is going to take a good 15 to 20 minutes, so make sure to pause the video. Okay, so welcome back for the final part of our lesson today. I wanted to talk to you about how not all cells look the way these cells do, like we just built in that simulation. I have a quick video for you that just shows what these cells, this is like if we could zoom in inside the human body. Okay, I can see red blood cells going through a blood vessel, for example. They look so different than the cells that we see in that simulation and in textbooks. So as we go through, look at all of these parts that we see. And in high school, what I want you to focus on is not just memorizing the parts of the cell, but thinking, okay, if I know what the cell does and I know what its job is, what part about its shape, its unique structures that make it shape differently than the other cells, what helps it do that job? Okay, so let's say here, okay, so they're showing the heart, and it's built out of muscle tissue made up of many muscle cells. So if we looked at muscle cells, we could ask, what makes those muscle cells so good at doing their job? What about those cells could help heart keep pumping? Okay, so we're thinking about our essential question for the day is, how does the structure help it do its function? Okay, so very interesting and very cool that you can see all of these different types of cells, and you're going to get to research one of them. Okay, so that brings us back to our last part of the day, which is here. So you can see, like we saw in the video, you can also see a lot of different types of cells. And almost all of these, except for the top two corners, except for this one and this one, are human cells. So all of these are in your body, which is really crazy to think about. Like this one is a neuron. It's found in your brain. It helps send messages and helps you think. Every time you think, these neurons are sending messages to other neurons. So I could think about, okay, its structure. If it has to send messages and receive messages, it has to be able to reach out to other neurons. So I could think about these long, stringy parts of the cell. We have dendrites and axons is what they're called, but they help the cell reach out to other cells. So I want you to think about those structures and how they help it do those functions that that cell might do. Okay, so you're going to get the chance to pick one really interesting type of cell, one weird, unique, really special cell to research. And we're going to do a project where we make a Google slide flyer to share on Google Classroom, and we'll do a virtual gallery walk, and we'll teach our classmates about our really weird cell. We'll have like a weird cell contest at the end. But so you need to pick one type of cell to research. And so this has all the requirements for what to put on your flyer. The cell name, a detailed picture, so a lot like these pictures, or maybe even a better one. Maybe an animation, that would work too. What kind of organism has that cell? So is it in a plant? Is it in an animal? Is it in a human? What types? And then where in that organism is it found? Like this one is found in the eye of a human. So I would say exactly that. Where in the human? In the eye. And then the function is, what does it do for us? So those cells in the eye, they help us see. And that is actually their job. That's what they're doing for the eye. It's helping us detect light. So you're going to get all of this background info, and then I want you to focus on this one right here, where it says at least 3 unique structures that help the cell do its unique job. So just like we talked about with the neuron and how these long, stringy structures might help it communicate. Or I could talk about here, this is skin, that's epithelial tissue, how all of these layers might help protect, because the skin's on the outside. So maybe the top layers get damaged, but there's still bottom layers below. So I want you to really think about how these structures help it do its job. Okay, so for our final instructions, you do have a rubric you're welcome to look at as you work. We are working with our partners today. And how you're going to sign up for your cell is this very first link. If you go to Google Classroom, you're going to go to the specialized cell signups. It's a Google form. Click on your Google form, and here you go. So you're going to put both partners' names. Only one partner needs to do it, and then to do the sign up at least. And then this is the list of cells to choose from. If you find a different cell that you would really like to do, talk to me and we'll make sure it works. But this is otherwise the cell to pick from, the cell list. And if you want to do a quick research on the types of cells before you decide, that's fine. But you want to decide quickly because as people sign up, these options will disappear. So like once someone signs up for neuron won't show up here anymore. So the longer you wait, the more cells will get taken. So go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to see your projects, and we can keep with our discussion of all these new specialized cells we're learning about. Thanks.